A storm is brewing in the quiet halls of royalty, and at the very centre of it stands a shocking revelation that could shift everything we thought we knew about the monarchy. Before we unravel this story in full detail, take a moment to subscribe to this channel, because the deeper we go, the more layers we uncover, and you won't want to miss a single twist. Princess Anne had stumbled upon evidence of secret financial transfers that pointed to Camilla, Queen Consort, and uncovered a hidden empire of offshore accounts, shell companies, and properties worth billions. When Anne began following the trail, Camilla abruptly disappeared into hiding, fueling suspicion that the fortune had not just been Camilla's, but tied to long-buried reserves of the monarchy itself, a secret so vast it threatened to shake the crown if ever revealed. It began not with fanfare, not with scandal splashed across headlines, but with something deceptively small, an overheard whisper, a curious record, a trail of faint financial signatures that would have slipped past almost anyone else. Yet Princess Anne, a woman known for her sharp eye, her discipline, and her unshakable sense of duty, did not let it pass. Where others might have ignored it, she saw a pattern forming. Whispers of unusual transfers began circling in discreet corners, and soon they reached her ears. Something about these movements of wealth didn't align with the carefully controlled image the monarchy presents to the world. Anne's instincts, honed over a lifetime of vigilance, told her something was wrong. Anne has always been both a pillar and a protector of tradition, one of the most steadfast figures in the royal orbit. And yet, her history with Camilla has never been without tension. The shadows of the past still linger, the wounds left behind by Diana's suffering, the sharp difference in values, the uneasy coexistence of two women shaped by very different approaches to family and duty. There has always been a quiet mistrust, a distance Anne never truly tried to bridge. Now, with whispers pointing directly toward Camilla, that mistrust sharpened into something undeniable. The financial transfers were not abstract figures on a page. They became living proof, the echo of something hidden. What began as a small thread quickly unravelled into something much larger. The numbers, once vague and meaningless, began to form a picture. Why were such sums being moved? Where did they lead? Each question tugged at Anne's mind until she could no longer let it rest. She began asking herself whether these strange financial movements were a matter of personal gain, or whether something far deeper was being concealed from both the family and the public eye. It was as though she had stepped into a hidden chamber beneath the palace, one where secrets were stacked upon one another, like old forgotten treasures. Anne's suspicion was no longer a private thought, it became a burden, one she carried in silence, her every instinct screaming that she had uncovered the first crack in a facade built to appear unshakable. The whispers of money had become a voice too loud to ignore, and with every new clue she found, the truth seemed to grow closer, heavier, and infinitely more dangerous. She knew that following this trail could change everything, not just her relationship with Camilla, but the very future of the monarchy itself. And in that quiet realisation, Anne understood that the path she was stepping onto was no ordinary one. It was the beginning of a story that would pull her deeper and deeper into a labyrinth of hidden wealth, old rivalries, and a secret powerful enough to shake the crown. Anne knew she couldn't rely on instinct alone. Whispers and suspicions, however sharp, would never be enough to expose the truth. To get answers, she quietly turned to one of her most trusted advisors, a figure who had served alongside her for years, someone who understood the delicate balance between loyalty to the crown and loyalty to truth. Together they began to piece together the trail. What they uncovered was not a simple stash of hidden money, but a sprawling network of offshore accounts, shell companies, and discrete property holdings that spanned across continents. At first, the findings seemed unbelievable. The scope was staggering: trusts buried in secrecy jurisdictions, properties tucked away under the names of obscure corporations, and financial instruments that only the most sophisticated minds could untangle. Villas in sun-soaked corners of Europe, luxury yachts discreetly docked under foreign flags, estates hidden behind layers of paperwork so complex they almost defied discovery. Every thread they pulled revealed more, as if the entire web had been meticulously constructed to stay invisible. Yet, with persistence and determination, Anne and her advisor began to see the shape of an empire that stretched far beyond Camilla's public life. It wasn't just the existence of this hidden fortune that chilled Anne, it was its size. Billions, quietly tucked away, growing silently over time, hidden in plain sight through the oldest trick of all, secrecy. For someone who had always lived her life rooted in discipline and restraint, the scale of these discoveries felt almost unreal, as though she were walking through a dream where every door opened into another room, filled with locked chests. This was not just wealth, it was power, and power of a kind that could not easily be explained away. The deeper Anne went, the more questions she had. Was this simply Camilla's doing, the result of careful manipulation and personal ambition? Or had she stumbled upon something older, something embedded within the monarchy itself? Could it be possible that what looked like greed was in fact a safeguard, a hidden reserve of wealth meant to shield the crown from catastrophe? The answers seemed to slip through her fingers, always just out of reach. Yet one truth became impossible to ignore. This empire, whether built for personal gain or out of some buried duty, had been deliberately kept in the shadows. It was wealth meant never to be seen, meant to remain invisible to all but a chosen few. And now, against all odds, Anne had seen it. What had begun as whispers was now a revelation. And with that revelation came a burden unlike any she had carried before. For if this secret ever came to light, the impact would not be measured in headlines or fleeting scandal. It would shake the very foundation upon which the monarchy was built. As Anne sifted through the endless maze of ledgers, deeds, and coded financial trails, a chilling realisation began to take root. This was not simply the story of one woman's hidden wealth. The vast network of accounts and holdings was far too intricate, far too deep, to have been constructed in the shadows of a single lifetime. It was as though she had uncovered an inheritance of secrets, something passed quietly from hand to hand, carefully hidden away for generations. Fragments of memory stirred within her. Conversations with her late mother, the Queen, came rushing back in pieces. Moments that at the time had seemed cryptic, but now burned with new meaning. The Queen had spoken, once or twice, about reserves, about resources that could never be acknowledged, only safeguarded. At the time, Anne had brushed it aside as the kind of distant ceremonial language her mother often used. But now it seemed clear. These billions might not have belonged to Camilla at all. They might instead represent the monarchy's most closely guarded secret. A hidden safety net meant to protect the crown against unthinkable storms. If that were true, then Camilla's role in this hidden empire was even more complicated. Was she guarding it as a custodian, entrusted with keeping it invisible? Or had she crossed a line, blurring the boundary between protecting the monarchy and enriching herself? The ambiguity gnawed at Anne. Camilla's silence, her refusal to either admit or deny, only added fuel to the fire. Every glance, every carefully chosen word seemed to suggest knowledge far beyond what she was willing to reveal. This was no longer a matter of suspicion. It had become a silent war of wills. Anne carried the weight of knowing the truth, or at least enough of it to sense the danger. Yet she also knew that Charles, bound by love and loyalty, would defend Camilla no matter what. To confront Camilla openly would mean challenging not only her, but the king himself. And so Anne remained silent, forced into the shadows of her own discovery. Her loyalty to the crown clashing painfully with her loyalty to truth. It was a lonely burden. She walked the corridors of palaces and estates with the knowledge that beneath the marble and gold, beneath the smiles and ceremonies, lay a secret strong enough to fracture everything. At night, when the world fell silent, she felt the weight pressing down on her shoulders. To reveal the truth could plunge the monarchy into chaos. To conceal it meant living with a lie that grew heavier by the day. And in that silence, Anne realised she had been pulled into something far larger than herself. This was not just about Camilla. It was about the monarchy's very survival, about whether centuries of carefully maintained tradition could withstand the unveiling of its most dangerous secret. The breaking point came when Anne could no longer carry the weight of silence alone. She sought out Camilla directly, in a moment stripped of ceremony and pretense. The confrontation was not theatrical. It was quiet, sharp, and deeply personal. Anne laid out what she had uncovered: the transfers, the shell companies, the properties scattered across the globe. For a fleeting moment, she hoped Camilla might deny it outright, dismiss it as fantasy, give her something to cling to. But Camilla did not. Her response was something far more unsettling. She neither confirmed nor denied. Instead, she met Anne's gaze with a calmness that seemed almost rehearsed, as though she had prepared for this moment long before it arrived. There was no shock, no defensiveness, no attempt to explain, only the faintest suggestion in her words that this wealth was larger than her, that it was not hers alone to reveal. It was a moment that spoke volumes without truly saying anything. And it left Anne reeling. For Anne, that silence said more than any admission could. It implied complicity, or perhaps stewardship of a legacy shrouded in secrecy. Camilla's lack of denial was its own kind of confirmation, that the billions existed, that they mattered, and that they were tied to something too vast, too dangerous to expose. It was as if Camilla was guarding a vault, not only of wealth, but of history itself, one that could never withstand the light of day. But secrets, no matter how carefully guarded, have a way of slipping into the world. Whispers began leaking out, tiny hints that something was amiss, a comment overheard, a rumour passed from hand to hand, until soon the press began circling like hounds sensing the faintest scent of blood. Questions started to appear in headlines, speculation rippled through society, and suddenly the air around the monarchy grew heavier with suspicion. Behind closed doors, pressure mounted. The family could feel the tremors of what was coming. It wasn't just curiosity, it was scrutiny, the kind that once unleashed it could not be contained. And through it all, Anne stood in silence, her confrontation with Camilla burning at the forefront of her mind. She had looked directly into the heart of the secret, and instead of finding clarity, she had been met with a wall of quiet, impenetrable resolve. That silence was the most dangerous thing of all, because silence, once broken, can shatter everything. In the days that followed Anne's first brush with the whispers of hidden wealth, something unsettling unfolded, a change so sudden it could not be ignored. Camilla, who had always been a visible presence at the king's side, seemed to evaporate from public life. At first it was subtle, a cancelled appearance here, a rescheduled engagement there, the kinds of things that could be explained away with vague statements about rest or private matters. But as the days stretched into weeks, the pattern became undeniable. Camilla had disappeared into hiding. For those outside the palace walls, the explanation seemed simple enough. Rumours circulated that she was unwell, that she had chosen to step back temporarily for her health. To most, this sounded reasonable. After all, royal life is demanding, and periods of retreat are not unusual. But to Anne, the timing was far too precise to be dismissed as coincidence. Camilla's withdrawal aligned almost perfectly with the moment Anne began tugging at the threads of unusual financial transfers. It was as if Camilla had sensed the storm before it broke and chosen to vanish into the shadows, removing herself from sight before questions could reach her directly. The absence was felt everywhere. Official functions carried on without her. Photographs of royal events showed Charles standing alone where Camilla would have normally been. The empty space at his side was more than symbolic. It was haunting. Conversations behind closed doors grew quieter, more cautious. Staff who had once bustled around her with constant activity now spoke of her in hushed tones, as if even mentioning her name might summon unwanted attention. The palace itself seemed to grow heavier, weighed down by the mystery of where she had gone and why. For Anne, every cancellation and every day of silence only deepened her suspicions. Was Camilla hiding out of fear that the truth was on the verge of being exposed? Had she already sensed that the carefully constructed web of offshore accounts, properties and trusts was slipping from her control? Or was this withdrawal not about fear at all, but strategy? A deliberate move to distance herself, to shield the secret empire she was guarding until the storm passed? The questions gnawed at Anne. Their weight growing heavier with each passing day, Camilla remained unseen. And yet Camilla's absence was not a retreat into irrelevance. It was its own kind of power. By vanishing, she denied anyone the chance to confront her publicly. She left no statements to dissect, no body language to interpret, no misstep to seize upon. Her silence became an armour, her invisibility a shield. It was as though she had wrapped herself in secrecy, daring anyone to prove what they suspected. The palace continued its rituals, the polished ceremonies, the smiling photographs, the carefully staged appearances. But to those who looked closely, the missing piece was glaring. Camilla's disappearance left a void that could not be ignored. A hollow space that made the monarchy itself feel incomplete. To the public, it was strange. To Anne, it was damning. Anne had always trusted her instincts, and now they told her this. Camilla's retreat into hiding was no accident. It was a move born of knowledge that something vast and hidden had come dangerously close to the light. And with each day, Camilla remained in the shadows. Anne's determination to uncover the truth grew sharper. Whatever Camilla was concealing, it was not enough to halt Anne's pursuit. Instead, her absence was confirmation that the trail Anne had discovered was worth following, no matter how dangerous it became. The storm Anne had feared was now gathering on every horizon. Though she herself had chosen silence, the discovery could not remain buried forever. The whispers had already seeped into the cracks of the public sphere, growing louder with every passing day. What began as subtle questions in hushed tones soon rippled outward, carried into conversations far beyond the palace walls. The image of stability, carefully polished for generations, now trembled under the weight of secrets too large to stay hidden. Inside the family, the air was heavy with unspoken tension. Anne carried herself with the same stoic grace she always had. But within her, the conflict raged. She had found the truth, or at least the outline of it, and yet she could not bring herself to expose it fully. To do so would risk not only Camilla, but the monarchy itself. And yet, by keeping it hidden, she knew she was complicit in the very secrecy she despised. Every smile, every ceremony, every handshake was now tinged with the knowledge of what lay beneath the surface. Camilla, for her part, moved through it all with a strange serenity. Perhaps it was confidence, perhaps resignation, but she seemed unshaken, as though she had accepted her role as guardian of something too vast for others to understand. Her refusal to explain, to admit or deny, only fueled the sense that this was not her secret alone, but a burden inherited, carried and protected at all costs. And Charles, bound by devotion, stood unwaveringly at her side, blind to the storm that brewed just beyond their reach. The outside world, however, was less forgiving. Rumours bled into speculation into suspicion. Public trust, already fragile, began to crack, and questions lingered without answers. It was not yet a scandal, but it was something more dangerous, an unresolved reckoning, one that grew heavier with every unspoken word. The monarchy, for all its traditions and carefully maintained appearances, now carried a shadow that refused to dissipate. Anne understood that the day of truth was inevitable. Whether tomorrow, a year from now, or decades later, the secret would demand to be revealed. She could feel it, like the pressure in the air before a storm breaks. When that day came, it would not simply expose Camilla, it would expose the very foundations upon which the monarchy stood. For now, she walked the fine line between silence and revelation, guarding the secret with the knowledge that her choice carried consequences far beyond herself. The empire she had glimpsed, the billions, the hidden accounts, the secret reserves, was not just a matter of wealth. It was a symbol of fragility, of the delicate balance between tradition and truth. And so the reckoning waits, suspended in time, hovering over the crown, like a shadow too large to banish. Anne knows it cannot stay hidden forever. The question is not if the truth will emerge, but when, and when it does, the monarchy will never be the same again.